Okay, so it's early in the morning. I just finished watching the DeFranco Nation Movie Club's film of the day. It's A Clockwork Orange. And I thought before I go to bed, I should probably spit out my thoughts and feelings on this film. So here it goes. A Clockwork Orange is a 1971 Stanley Kubrick film, many regard it as a great classic of modern cinema. And I see why. This film is chock full of modern philosophical and psychological issues, many ideas that up to this point had not been looked at in modern cinema. Stanley Kubrick typically has the balls to actually take these ideas head on, and he does so with The Clockwork Orange. That said, this movie, while having many interesting things to say, has several flaws. If you haven't seen the movie, let me give you a brief synopsis. It's about a young man named Alex who has a gang of thugs who go out nightly and engage in what they call ultra-violence. Well, one night Alex gets busted. It turns out the woman that he was attacking that night ended up dying after the fact, and he was charged for murder. So he goes to prison. While in prison, he hears about this new therapy that's being used to rehabilitate the worst offenders. He inquires about it and eventually gets chosen as a subject for this experimental rehabilitation technique. This is where the film gets truly frightening. The behavioral scientists put him in a straitjacket, force his eyelids open, and expose him to sexually violent images and films while he is being injected with a drug that causes him to feel nauseous and horrible and like he's going to die. Of course, if you know anything about behavioral psychology, the idea is if he feels nauseous while viewing the sexually violent films, then he is going to associate the sexually violent images with the feeling of impending death. Well, this actually works. He is essentially rehabilitated on one level. But on another level, as they point out in the film, he has no choice. He still wants to strike out. He still wants to be violent and sexually deviant. But he has no choice because when he experiences the urges to engage in those behaviors, he feels an overwhelming sense of death and nausea and sickness, which then keep him from actually acting out. This is the heart of the film. The questioning of justice versus rehabilitation, the idea of a sociopathic mind and the question of whether or not they can be truly healed, and the power of behavioral therapy. This is the crux of the film. But to get on with the story, Alex obviously demonstrates that he is rehabilitated, gets set free early, which was his desire, but ends up in a world where his family have already replaced him and forgotten him, where his old droogs have become corrupt police who end up grabbing him and beating him up because he was such a bad friend, and then getting put back in a situation where he was in the beginning of the film, except this time the tables have turned. I'll let you see the film to understand what I mean by that. The point is, he experiences not only so-called rehabilitation, but then when he gets out into the real world, he experiences true karmic justice, if you want to call it that. Essentially, he gets what's coming to him, even though his mind has been repaired, so to speak. This is a fascinating film on a sociological, psychological level. Absolutely. I mean, for its time back in the early 70s, few films ever touched on any of these issues with such rawness and bravado, like only Stanley Kubrick can deliver. That said, the down points are, it definitely is dated. The soundtrack, which is almost completely classical, is great when it's played by an orchestra. Other times it's synthesized, and frankly, it's very dated and gets kind of cheesy at times. Some of the directing, the acting, is over the top. It's overdone. It's melodramatic to the point where it's silly. That said, this film is very important in light of the bigger picture of cinema. It deals with behavioral therapy and the issue of rehabilitation versus justice in a way that no other films had done up to this point. And for that, I give Stanley Kubrick hats off. So if you're prepared to deal with a dated and at times very disturbing film, then I highly recommend A Clockwork Orange. If you're not really into that kind of stuff, then I'd probably advise you to avoid it. Either way, those are my thoughts. I'm Craig the Critic, and I would like to know what you think. Please take a moment to send me your thoughts and comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about the film and what you think about what I thought about the film. And until next time, Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.